Yeah, that might be January every night, and I've had 3 doctors come back and tell me no. And you won't get
You can't get a train. I can't know them. Melbourne's talk, he goes for, and so no, take a few I see. I always feel that way. Which one?
Maybe we need to start like on I know, the only one I've got is one that if you go any bigger than that magnet size, it's like short. There is a lot of back now. Oh, now Jared has one.
All right, we're going to get started. But first, some advertorial. Don't forget you can buy your tea towels here out the front. Got some great messages on them. I feel like it's merchandising that's going on here. You just want a bigger slice of the cake. Don't you agree?
Yay!
Okay. Unfortunately, Michael West is unable to be here tonight, so I'll acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. So I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, on whose land we meet, and elders past, present and future. And I'd like to welcome you here tonight on behalf of the New South Wales Children's Services Forum. I'm Leanne Gibbs from Community Childcare Cooperative. So welcome and thank you for being here tonight. I'll just do a quick introduction and then I'm going to hand it over and I'll explain the format for the evening. So, first of all, make sure that if there's any alarms or anything, just walk out and walk towards the light, I think is the best way to go. So, as I said, this forum is tonight put on by the New South Wales Children's Services Forum, and we're here to talk about the future prosperity of New South Wales. And that prosperity is dependent upon having a strong, educated, socially capable, civically minded, solution-focused, innovative and creative population. And how can we do this? It seems like a dream. Well, we all know in this room that it's all about early childhood education. Internationally and in the domestic environment, we see evidence of the benefits of high-quality early childhood education. And the benefits are not just for the individual child, they're for the family, for the community and for society. So that's why we're here tonight. The early childhood education makes the difference, and what a subsidised system does is it ensures that more children have access and engage in an early childhood education. So tonight I'd like to welcome our elected reps here, and we'd like to say to you, thank you for coming, and we're going to give you the opportunity to give your perspective and tell us what plans you have in coming into this election. So this is how we'll go, the format for the evening. First of all, we'll have our Minister speak, and I think he's just about to come in now, so he'll be here momentarily. Minister for Education, Adrian Piccoli. He will speak first, and then from here on we'll have the Honourable Linda Burney and then Dr. John Kay. And to deliver the introductions, we'll have Chris Legg, CEO of KU Children's Services, Trish Brown, Director of Uniting Care Children's Services, and Rebecca O'Sullivan, Executive Director of the Mobile Children's Services Association. So what will happen tonight is that our introductions will be made. Our elected representatives will be speaking and telling us about their awesome plans for early childhood education. And then you'll have an opportunity, we'll respond on behalf of the sector, and you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. So please form up your questions and make sure they are really great questions that are going to ask that really hard question here of our elected reps. We've got a few things that we need to tell you. Is there anybody here on Twitter? Great, fantastic. So there are the hashtags for Twitter, and also you can ask questions via our Facebook page as well for listeners at home, and we're live streaming this event as well. So I don't know how many people are logged in at home, but welcome to you all, and welcome to everybody in this room. And the big headliner question that we want to ask on behalf of the early childhood sector and on behalf of children and families is, how will all parties work together to ensure every child in New South Wales has a high quality early childhood education at an affordable cost for families? What we really want for New South Wales children is a bigger slice of the cake. So I'm now going to hand over to Chris Legg.
Tea towels just fell down. Thanks, Leanne. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you the Minister for Education, the first country MP to hold that position in 35 years. Adrian has built a reputation as a pragmatist with a keen focus on improving outcomes for regional students. He has been Deputy Leader of the Nationals since 2008. Adrian has spent much of his working life providing a strong and passionate voice for the people of his local community and across country in New South Wales. He was born and raised in Griffith and spent his early working years there as a solicitor and a farmer before becoming the member for Murrumbidgee in 1999. He holds a Bachelor of Economics and a Bachelor of Laws from the Australian National University in Canberra. He's been a member of the National Party for over 20 years and lives in Griffith with his wife Sonia and their 2 children. Since entering Parliament, he has held the shadow ministerial portfolios of Education, Skills, Youth Affairs, Water, State and Regional Development, Mineral Resources, Lands and Natural Resources, as well as serving as a shadow minister assisting the leader for Natural Resources, Forests and Ethnic Affairs. Please welcome the Minister, Adrian Piccoli.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Let me begin by acknowledging that we are on the traditional lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past and present and to other Aboriginal people here tonight. Thank you very much for the invitation to discuss the important issues around childhood education in New South Wales with you this evening. We all share a common goal for each and every child in New South Wales to have the same access and opportunity to the best possible education start in life. As a parent myself of 1 child still in an early childhood setting, every parent, grandparent, everyone who works in the sector wants our young people to be safe, happy and well cared for, and to be inspired and encouraged to start their journey in lifelong learning. We all want, of course, our children to be nurtured by qualified staff and to play and learn in well-resourced centres. As some of you know, I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old who have both had the benefit of a quality early childhood education, one still experiencing it. And I can say that nothing focuses the mind of a minister more than to see the impacts of reforms on their own children. Not to mention the fact that every time I walk into the doors of the Dorothy Wade Early Learning Centre, Neville Dwyer is waiting and takes his chance to lobby me, including this morning when I dropped Jasper off in Griffith. The early childhood education sector has undergone significant change over the past few years with major reforms in New South Wales and nationally. So I'd first like to acknowledge the role of the sector, of everyone here tonight, in delivering early childhood education during a time of fast-paced and significant change. We've come a long way in 4 years. It's been an honour and a privilege to work with the sector, and I really value the advice, conversations and the debates that I've had with you and your colleagues. I do like to consult widely, perhaps that makes me a pragmatist, listen to all the stakeholders and be challenged. I ask for the evidence, I ask for advice, and then I test that advice. Before I get started, I want to make it clear that I absolutely and have always backed the National Quality Framework, as did the previous New South Wales Government and what it is achieving. Consistently high quality early childhood education and care for the best possible early learning outcomes and environments for children. New South Wales, as I have said many times before, will not back down from quality, and it has been with your advice and support that we've continued to drive high quality education and care across the sector. For many years before this government was elected, you, the sector, asked the previous government to move early childhood education into the education portfolio where it belongs. But it didn't happen. 4 years ago, we listened to you and we did what you asked. So in early 2011, we moved responsibility for preschools and early childhood to the education portfolio. Children's Services, as it was known then, had been left in the Community Services portfolio, where it didn't really connect to the broader education agenda. We see all education as a continuum, so we needed to bring the education and care of our youngest children under the umbrella of the Department of Education. It has also heralded a more child-centred approach to policy making and funding reform. Of course we need to invest more money into early childhood. We inherited the budget position we did 4 years ago, and we've improved that general budget position substantially. We're now starting to see the dividends from that hard work. Yes, I have seen the campaign by the sector, an effective campaign by the sector, outlining where New South Wales ranks in terms of spending. There has not been a budget where I have not submitted to New South Wales Treasury and the Treasurer for more funds in early childhood, and I will continue to do precisely that if we are re-elected. However, I am very proud of our record in early childhood over 4 years. I'm extremely proud that our preschool participation rate for children in the year before they start school rose to 96.2% last year, up from 81.9% in 2008. For Aboriginal children, the increase has been even more dramatic. In 2013, preschool participation rate of Aboriginal children was 97.9%, compared with about 80% in 2008. These figures are indeed impressive and we'll continue to build on them. When we came into government, we had some of the most expensive preschool fees in Australia. We had a complicated funding model and the lowest percentage of children enrolled in state government funded or provided preschools of any state. You as a sector told me that we needed to overhaul funding so that available funds were more equitably distributed. And we needed to do more so that children who most needed access to early childhood education actually received these services. We listened and we have acted. To sort out our funding mess that we had been left, I asked Professor Brennan to undertake a much needed review of funding arrangements for early childhood. She found the system, not surprisingly, complex, inefficient, full of historical anomalies and poorly targeted funding, so that the funding was not targeted at children most in need. Half of children attending a New South Wales government-funded preschool were attending for 2 or more years before starting school, but 30,000 children around the state were missing out completely, particularly in disadvantaged communities. As an immediate measure to support families while we develop new funding arrangements, we distributed a one-off $20 million funding injection to help reduce fees for families with children in the year before school, which saw fees drop on average by 23% across New South Wales. Last year, the preschool funding model came into effect and made available $150 million to the community preschool sector, a 20% increase on funding levels under the old system. In line with Professor Brennan's recommendations and our commitment to universal access national partnerships, funding for community preschools has now been targeted to 4 and 5-year-old children in a year before school and 3-year-old children from disadvantaged and Aboriginal backgrounds. Under that model, 95% of community preschools have seen an increase in their base funding rate, with the highest increases directed to children from disadvantaged backgrounds. Disadvantaged and Aboriginal children aged 3 and up have seen their funding rates increase by 60% at least. Our aim in developing the preschool funding model was to promote universal access, and so far it is working. Already, average daily preschool fees have gone down by 6% compared to 2013, and there are more enrolments of children from the target cohort, particularly from Aboriginal and low-income families. Another recommendation made by Professor Brennan, based on your advice, was the development of a transition to school statement. It is a way in which a child's prior to school learning and development can be easily communicated with their new school, giving early childhood teachers a way to share their knowledge, helping school teachers to connect with children when they start school, and giving parents a voice in communicating their child's strengths. Close connections between early childhood services and schools are vital for ensuring that there is continuity of learning for children as they move into school, and I've seen it myself with my own children. Earlier today, I announced a plan that will support public schools in partnering with community preschools and other early childhood education providers to co-locate facilities on school sites where possible and to identify opportunities for schools and services to collaborate. I announced this whilst visiting Victoria Avenue Public School in Concord West, which has a long day care centre on the school site run by Canada Bay Council, as well as a purpose-built bush, and which will serve as a model for new schools that we're building at places like Ultimo and Parramatta. We also recognise the importance of ensuring access to a quality preschool program for children with a disability. When I became Minister for Education, there were 2 disability funding programs for children in preschools, with a huge amount of overlap and duplication between them, poor accountability and different levels of service delivery depending on location. Professor Brennan recommended we combine the intervention support program and the supporting children with additional needs program. This is what you, the sector, have advocated for, and so we developed the Preschool Disability Support Program, a program of which I'm very proud. An additional $2 million that was previously spent on administrative overheads is now going directly to supporting children, and the universal disability loading goes to all services. As a country MP, I have also made it my mission as a minister to make sure that geography is no barrier to access to education at any level. No Australian child should ever be disadvantaged because of their postcode. As part of our rural and remote education blueprint, I committed to ensuring that more children in rural and remote communities gain the benefits of an early childhood education in the year before school. I know, and you know, that the provisions of early childhood education in rural and remote areas comes with its unique challenges. So we have brought in per child loadings to all services whose location is classified as outer regional, remote or very remote, in recognition that service delivery is harder in these areas. We've also raised capacity in these preschools by almost 320 places. But of course we want to do more, and we can do more. I am pleased tonight to announce we'll invest a further $4 million in rural and remote communities to help services connect with families who aren't sending their children to preschool. Preschools in areas classified by the ABS to be outer regional, remote and very remote will receive one-off grants of $7,000 each for this purpose. We've already increased the capacity of preschools in rural and remote areas to cater for additional children with a $5 million community preschool capital program to help services grow. When these 13 projects are completed, they will have created more than 360 additional preschool places in areas where they are most needed. Another area where we've listened and taken on board the advice and views of the sector was your reasonable request for preschools to be funded for the children that are actually enrolled at the time they are actually attending. When I took over early childhood education, I was amazed that you put in your numbers in August and didn't get funded until the following December. We improved that, first thing, to about a 6-month gap, so we reduced the 18-month gap to about 6 months, and I know that the sector appreciated that. The lag time between reporting census data and receiving a payment should never have been that long. Now I'm pleased to tell you we are introducing a biannual top-up census starting from February next year. This means you will continue to submit your data in August and get paid at the end of that year. And then you will submit a smaller subset of data to capture what has changed in March after enrolments have settled and for which you'll be paid around July. You will be funded for the first time for the actual children you have in your service. Again, you have asked for that and we have delivered. I'd now like to turn to issues around the Commonwealth, particularly national partnerships, that have been so crucial in our goal of universal access to a quality early childhood education program. To ensure a sustainable and thriving sector, we need ongoing funding and support from the Commonwealth Government. Ongoing Commonwealth investment remains uncertain. Families and service providers in New South Wales do need longer-term certainty around available funding if we are continuing the national reforms started in 2008. This government has consistently advocated for funding certainty for early childhood education, and we will continue to do so. Just last Thursday at the meeting of Education Ministers, by phone, I was sitting in a car in Strathmerton on the phone in Victoria, because ironically to get to different parts of my electorate, it's quicker to go via Victoria. I asked that the Commonwealth essentially come clean on its plans for funding the states sooner rather than later, because you need the certainty. I can assure you that the New South Wales Government is continuing to maintaining all its existing programs in early childhood education, and we await that certainty from the Commonwealth. Of course, it's all well and good to be raising participation rates and access to early childhood education, but these reforms are only meaningful when the education that children receive meets a certain standard of quality. The government, as I said, is committed to maintaining and strengthening those high quality standards. We're pursuing quality improvements across the early childhood education and care sector through the implementation of the National Quality Agenda. We're supporting the sector in our shared goal of strengthening the quality of early childhood services across New South Wales. We want to provide opportunities for those working in the sector to continue their education and further develop their skills. In 2013-14, the department offered scholarships to educators wishing to upgrade their qualifications from diploma level to becoming an early childhood teacher. We awarded 102 scholarships over 2 years to recipients from many diverse backgrounds and communities. The first of these recipients are now graduating and taking their new skills and knowledge back into the service where they are employed. As the interest in these scholarships was so strong, I'm pleased to announce that we will offer more scholarships to educators in rural and regional areas to help them become qualified early childhood teachers. You might remember that for years you asked the previous government to accredit early childhood teachers in the same way as all other teachers in New South Wales, and it was put in the too hard basket. It's only right that early childhood teachers are recognised as the professionals that they are. So last year we introduced legislation that will, for the first time, accredit early childhood teachers alongside their colleagues in schools. As I said earlier, the New South Wales Government is strongly supportive of the National Quality Agenda for early childhood education and care. we are committed to this reform. We, like families and service providers, know that quality early childhood education and care is hugely important for the well-being and development of our children. At the same time, we also recognise that the reform agenda is indeed ambitious. We want to ensure that the reforms are implemented successfully and sustainably in New South Wales without placing an excessive burden on services or families, and will continue to seek the advice of the sector on how to do this. As I said right at the beginning, the past few years have seen significant reform in this sector, and sector representatives have been instrumental in driving this change, as well as having to implement it. The challenges we were set were significant, but we've risen to meet them. You asked for change, reform and improvement, and we have delivered it. We will continue to work with the sector to better support our shared goal of improving quality early childhood education and care for our children. We've come a long way together in early childhood education in just 4 years, and I'm excited and encouraged about our future partnership. And again, I thank you very much for inviting me to participate in today's forum.
Thank you, Minister. I'm just going to do a little bit of a quick summing up of what you've said. I think nobody in this room doubts your commitment to high quality early childhood education, and we thank you for that. We do know that New South Wales has been a leader within the Commonwealth. We have for a long time seen the value of having qualified early childhood teachers, and I'm glad that we've not given in to any pressures of taking them away. So I guess the other thing that I heard you say, we have embarked on some major reforms over the last 4 years, both on a statewide and a Commonwealth level. And I think one thing that the early childhood sector is really good at is change and flexibility and adapting. So it has been a bumpy ride along the way for some of us. I think it's also, it's good to hear you publicly say your absolute commitment for national quality reform. And that's in this current climate. It's terrific to hear that. I think all of us would say it was great to have the early childhood education sector moved into education. You know, we do want to be seen as a profession. The accreditation of teachers is another step towards that. And I guess your willingness to listen to advice, to engage Dr. Deb Brennan to undertake a review of the sector was good. It's obviously very evidence-based. We have seen some money coming in to preschools in New South Wales, but I think all of us here tonight would say it's not enough. And you yourself have acknowledged that. We would encourage you to continue to go to Treasury to ask for more money. Even with all the reforms we've had, preschool fees still remain the highest in the state. However, the other good things that have happened is the connectedness with schools, the transition to school statements where teachers in schools are recognising the fine work that early childhood teachers do in the sector has been a great move forward, and I would imagine as more and more people get used to it, it will be used and accepted more widely. Your announcements today we would welcome. We would certainly not disagree with any of those. I think everybody, particularly in New South Wales, does want some certainty from the Commonwealth about funding. It's very hard for services and service operators to continue to operate in an unknown climate, and we know that we're dependent on the universal access funding. I guess the scholarships have been great. Your commitment to rural areas is also fantastic. We do acknowledge that there are particular issues that rural services experience that, compared to us, you know, other services in the metropolitan region. We would look forward to working with you, particularly on the teacher accreditation and the teaching standards, because I'd have to make this point. What we don't want to have is the primary school teaching standards pushed onto us. we would like to have some input into the standards that are appropriate in the early years learning framework for early childhood educators. So thank you very much. We are going to open it up to questions now, and there are some roving mics going around. So here's your opportunity to ask the Minister directly what you'd like to know. There's a question over there.
Oh, I've got a question, a comment. Sorry, just to follow up. My name's Melissa from the Inner West, and I'd just like to comment on the changes made to the disability access to funding. As a mother of 2 children with disabilities, autism specific, it's going to make a great difference to people coming in now. I've already been through that stage in early childhood, but for people coming in now into the system, that's going to alleviate a lot of pressures from families. So the implications aren't just for the sector, but for the community as well. It's huge. Thank you.
I know the comment, but I mean, what you said right at the end is the thing that matters. None of this is about, all of this is primarily about the children that you look after. Children first, sector second. And that's exactly what it's designed for. I mean, we've freed up an extra $2 million there to go directly to services, and I think in a more equitable way to support the children that you're talking
Is it on? Yep. Hi, my name's Carol and I work for a mobile children's service. So I guess that one of the struggles is that we're actually going to lose funding, which I know we're contracted. But the other thing is that I'm actually currently liaising with a public school out 40 k's out of Mudgee, who have no access to any early childhood service, and who the principal has told me that without access to early childhood service, her best start results are much lower. It's a very disadvantaged community, and you know, so they're obviously 4% of the children who have no universal access. So I guess I want to know how those communities are going to get universal access, and will the $7,000 go to help those services?
Look, I'm glad you asked me a question about a school 40 k's, a school or service for children out 40 k's out of Mudgee. If I win the seat I'm standing for at the next election, I'll represent about 25% of New South Wales. So lots of services out west towards Hay and beyond rely on mobile services, and so everything we're trying to do here is to get children into early childhood before they start school. That's the point. I was at a high school in Dubbo before I was the Minister for Education. I asked the high school, what is the one thing I could do to help you in terms of student results and student performance? He pointed across the road to Dubbo West Public School, and he said, spend your money at Dubbo West Public School, get us better prepared kids in year 7. I asked the public school, and they said, and they've got a deck preschool there, get kids that have been to preschool or long day care well prepared before they come into kindergarten. So everything we're doing has that continuum, as I said. Part of the reason why we put early childhood, why it fits in education, because it all starts really the day a child is born, that education, that lifelong learning. So the purpose of everything we do is to get children in. So whether it's mobile services, whether it's services in small communities, we've got the viability funding. I get asked this question a lot about the preschool funding model. For some services doesn't quite work because they're in smaller communities. We don't want services in thin markets to close, because then we're not achieving our policy objective, which is to get certainly children the year before they start school to have at least 1 year's experience in early childhood. So mobile services that you're talking about are absolutely key to us. But the second thing is also transitions. You just mentioned it before, Chris. Transition from early childhood into school. Some kindergarten, some primary schools treat children as if they don't know anything and have never been to long daycare. Year 7 sometimes treat kids like they've never been to primary school and treat them as if they haven't learned a single thing. That's why these transitions are also so important. The perfect outcome in New South Wales is every child in a quality early childhood setting, at least a year before they start school. That is absolutely the best thing that we can do for every single student.
Hello, Minister. Tanya Barnett here as advocate tonight.
I always get worried when you ask me.
And my question goes to quality, and I'd also like to acknowledge how you've stood up for quality for children in Australia, not just in New South Wales. And it goes to teachers, and I acknowledge also the Accreditation Act, which I saw came out today. Recently, there's been a focus on the quality of degree courses for the preparation of teachers, and you've had things to say about that, particularly primary school teachers. This is resulting in increasing demands for inclusion of extra content to be provided within degree courses. As early childhood teachers usually gain their qualification in a degree that includes early childhood and primary education, there's likely to be a negative impact on the birth to 5 focus, and so graduates will be less well prepared for working in prior to school settings. So my question to you is, will the Department of Education change its employment policy so that teachers can undertake a degree that has as its focus birth to 8 years and not birth to 12 as currently required, so that we will have quality graduates to work in prior to school settings?
Given the tone of that question, I guess you want me to say yes. Look, we have absolutely focused on in early childhood, and I'll give credit to the previous government too. They were very strong on the National Quality Framework and sticking by it. We came into government and done precisely the same thing, despite pressures from other states and other to weaken it. But our focus on quality teaching in schools is matched by what we expect in early childhood. So we've done a lot of work around that. The great teaching inspired learning reforms, which include the registration and accreditation of early childhood teachers. So happy to have that discussion. I won't say yes yet, but anything we can do to improve the quality of the workforce, whether it's in early childhood, primary, secondary, whatever it is, we're absolutely committed to, because we know that, as I said, it's not just about getting children in, but it's what you do when they're in there, and the higher the quality we have. And the more, I guess, targeted too their training is for the setting in which they teach, the better it is too. So
I'll make an appointment.
Oh, hello. My name is Lisa James. I was an early childhood teacher for 9 years and I now work for the Independent Education Union. Now, you would be aware that we have lobbied for early childhood teachers to be included in teacher accreditation, and we're really happy this is going to happen. One of our major concerns, however, is that the current award rate for preschool teachers in non-government schools is now more than $30,000 less than Department of Education primary teachers, and also they're the preschool teachers. That's at the top of the scale. Now, the state government has maintained that teachers need to bargain for their wages with their employers, but I believe this is a flawed argument for 2 reasons. One is that many community-based preschools have told us and the teachers that they'd love to pay them what Department of Education preschool teachers get, but they can't afford to do that with the current funding envelope from the state government. And the other thing I'd like to draw your attention to is the New South Wales Health Department actually employ 30 early childhood teachers, and they are paid $20,000 less, and that's actually a state government department. Thank you.
So I'm going to try my best to remember the technicalities around this, but teachers in the Department of Education who are primary high school teachers, including early childhood teachers, are employed under the Teaching Services Act and are paid under the award, which is the, as you say, the higher level, which teachers employed in long daycare or community preschools are obviously not. So they are under 2 awards. That's hence the big discrepancy. Now, how you balance that up is you put lots of extra money in there, and nobody in this room, as I say, would disagree that more money needs to be invested in early childhood. So it is a question of money and a question of budgets about how you make up that gap. I know the difficulty that providers have when you're looking for teachers and they look across the road at the primary school and see the opportunities for higher salary, and I totally get that. It's a question of funding between the states and the Commonwealth to bridge that gap, and for which there is no easy answer, and I know this has been talked about for a long time. I wish I had a much better answer to give you tonight, but everybody in the sector, and I think everybody in government, is aware of it.
We have a question coming through Facebook.
Oh.
Hello Minister, we've got our social media team here tonight and we're taking questions through Facebook and Twitter using the hashtag NSW Forum. So we have a question here from Janelle Rolls from our Facebook page, and she asks, could you please tell us how your government will support state-funded, community-based preschools to lower their daily fees, thus increasing enrolments?
Well, the question was partly answered in my earlier remarks around how we've targeted both state and Commonwealth, the state and Commonwealth funding that we receive for preschools. So we have deliberately in the preschool funding model targeted it at 4-year-olds, year before school, which we are required to do under the national partnership conditions, targeted at the year before school and disadvantaged 3-year-olds and Aboriginal 3-year-olds. Recognising that 2 years for disadvantaged children is obviously very important. 2 years for disadvantaged students, particularly significant. But we have targeted our resources that way, and how we've sought to increase enrolments is to have an impact on fees. We know that fees drive much of the enrolment by parents, and that's why we've targeted our funding that way. I know there gets raised with me constantly the issue about 3-year-olds, the funding of non-disadvantaged 3-year-olds in preschools, but we have made a policy decision that we wanted to get, as I was asked by Carol, we want to get 100% of 4-year-olds getting at least 15 hours a week into a quality early childhood setting. We've targeted our dollars there to try and keep those fees as low as possible. There were some preschools that were enrolling students that were 2, 1, less than 1 in preschools. Now, they're not really designed for that. We've targeted our dollars to get the policy outcome that I think the community wants, and what schools want, what parents want, in terms of making sure, as much as possible, we reduce those fees in the year before school.
Hi Minister. Even with that money that you're talking about, the fees are still very high. They're still the highest in Australia. So in order to actually achieve the goals that you want to achieve, more money needs to be there. We hear that you're asking for more in the budget, but it's really needed. We just need to have more money so that people can reduce those fees and therefore more children will access and the policy goals will be achieved. How can we do that?
The very lobbying that you do, lobbying me, lobbying others, the government, the opposition, others, is an effective way to get the message out to all elected representatives. So every minister will go in and argue the case for more funding in their portfolios, and early childhood is not a huge part of in terms of dollars. When you think it's 10 billion goes into school education, it's not a huge section of the education budget. We go in every year and we ask for more money and argue the case, the reasons why, the data, the evidence about why funding makes a difference. Now, over 4 years, we manage a budget like New South Wales government manages a budget like every service provider in this room manages a budget within their own service. Treasury and others make decisions, Cabinet makes decisions about how those dollars are allocated. And we've seen some slight increases, but we haven't seen the kind of increases that I know that the sector would like to see.
So you'd like us to continue lobbying?
Yeah. It helps me when you lobby.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name's Shannon. I work for Good Start Early Learning. My focus to you is on, we've got so many high quality educators that are disappearing from our sector each week due to possibly being paid about $18 to $19 an hour. And I want to know how you're going to support us in lobbying for the wages that I think we deserve.
No, it's a fair question. As I said, it's one of the things that I get badgered about when I drop my kids off to Neville. This problem has been around for a long time. This salary discrepancy is a driver driving teachers into schools rather than into long day care services, into early childhood services. It's not an easy problem to resolve because it is a matter of budget and substantial amounts of money. And whatever is the resolution, it'll have to be a shared one between states and the Commonwealth.
Hi Minister, my name is Kerry and I'm from Parklands Community Preschool on the Central Coast. And I've just got a couple of comments about the discussion and the things that you've commented on. There's 13 community-based services in our area, and you said there's a 6% decrease in fees. In all but one of the community services at preschools on the Central Coast, the 12 other services, the cost is continually rising for every service. The other question I have is, preschools aren't a growing industry. There's a finite number of preschools in New South Wales and a finite number of places. Why can't the New South Wales Government fund the number of places that are provided in a preschool service as opposed to the number of 4-year-olds? Because if services had access to more 4-year-olds, it would be in their interest to have them come into their service. If there are no more 4-year-olds in that area and they can't fill the places, that is going to impact so much on the quality of the service. And I know that we were recently assessed and we were an exceeding service, and I'm really proud of the fact that all of our educators worked really hard under the national quality standards to achieve that. And I find now that it is so difficult in this climate of uncertainty for us with our funding to continue to have that climate of quality for all the children that access our service.
No, that's right, but part of the reason why we changed the model to fund specifically 4-year-olds and disadvantaged 3-year-olds was to move away from that funding individual places, because there were services that preschools enrolling 2-year-olds, 1-year-olds, 3-year-olds, and obviously 4-year-olds. So what we've done is targeted the dollars we've got to get the policy outcome that we want, which is trying to get 100% of children the year before they start school to have attended a preschool or a long day care. So it's specifically targeted to do that, rather than funding the place which could be filled by a 2-year-old or a non-disadvantaged 3-year-old. So, but this is where the viability funding comes into place. If you're in a thin market, it's not quite the right way to describe it, but we run out of 4-year-olds. We're not going to let in Lake Cargelligo, if they've got all the 4-year-olds in Lake Cargelligo, we're not going to let a service go under in Lake Cargelligo. Otherwise, we won't be servicing the 4-year-olds. That's what the viability funding is for. But if there are...
That's for remote. We're not actually remote. So
but,
does that mean our service have to... Does that mean my service now has to shrink?
Well, I can't speak for individual services, but the funding is designed to drive change in the way that services enrol students. So targeting 4-year-olds, targeting disadvantaged 3-year-olds. So 3-year-olds, non-disadvantaged 3-year-olds can still be enrolled in a preschool, but obviously the fees are different. So the dollars are targeted at the outcome that we're trying to achieve here, 4-year-olds and disadvantaged 3-year-olds. Now I know that has an impact, and then people will have to change historically what they've done, or potentially have to change historically what they've done. But this is the whole point of changing the model, is to change some of the enrolment, some of those enrolment trends. Preschools enrolling 2-year-olds, we want preschools to be focused on making sure they've got all those 4-year-olds. Brendan identified, I think it was 30,000 4-year-olds that are not enrolled in an early childhood setting. That's why the model's changed, to encourage services to find those 4-year-olds. And as I said, where there aren't, then that's where the viability funding comes in.
Even if you're not in a even if you're not in a remote area?
Well, it's not specific to rural and remote, but obviously, rural and remote is where it's going to be most sort of applicable. But I don't know exactly the services in and around where you are. The viability funding is not limited to rural and remote.
But you have a year of 4-year-olds, a whole centre of 4-year-olds going off to school. So you lose that connection by not enrolling your 3-year-olds as well. They go to another service because there's no space. So the viability of our services has become very fragile, up and down on those years of up and down enrolments of children of age. You never get a whole year of 4-year-olds enrolled. You get an older year, a younger year, an older year, and a younger year. And by taking that away from us, by nurturing those children to come with family grouping, because families won't drop a 4-year-old off somewhere and their 3-year-old off somewhere else. They won't do that. They'd rather go to a service that offers that service for them. So now you've made all our state-based preschools so fragile because of those enrolment fluctuations.
Well, it's also a condition of the National Partnership funding that's exactly what we target. So if we don't do it, then it jeopardises the Commonwealth funding. But this is the policy objective. Now, changing the way we fund services is targeted at getting as many 4-year-olds enrolled as possible, disadvantaged 3-year-olds. So that's who services receive the highest subsidies for. So there are examples of where 4-year-olds were coming and there weren't places because services enrolled non-disadvantaged 3-year-olds. So what we're trying to do here, I mean, I don't have a personal thing against 3-year-olds, I've had 2 of them myself. But we know the value of early childhood. We know what it means when a child then starts school. That child's personal development. We've got to make places available for every one of them in the year, at least the year before they start school. And how you do that is you provide financial incentives for services to enrol 4-year-olds.
So if I know I've got people 100 k's away, they've got 4-year-olds that can't access the service, should I put on a bus to get them to come up to my spaces because I've got no other 4-year-olds there to enrol? Because that just seems really ludicrous. It's locale based. There are 4-year-olds that can't access the preschool service. There aren't enough preschools in that area for them to access a service. There are other services that are operating really great services that don't have that population of 4-year-olds. So it's a locale-based thing. It shouldn't be so cut and dry. And that's where I think the inflexibility is really going to impact on what services can offer for their community.
I just would like to get you to join me just to thank Minister for coming tonight. Lovely debate. Thank you very much. I'd just like to call Trish to come up and introduce the Honourable Linda Burney.
Good evening, everyone. I now have the pleasure of introducing the Honourable Member Linda Burney to our forum this evening. Linda Burney was elected Member for Canterbury in 2003 and she's currently the New South Wales Labor Deputy Leader of the Opposition. Linda's also the Shadow Minister for Family and Community Services, Shadow Minister for Aboriginal Affairs, Shadow Minister for Early Childhood Education and Shadow Minister for the Central Coast. It's a very busy little schedule. Linda was appointed Parliamentary Secretary for Education and Training in 2005 and joined Cabinet as Minister for Fair Trading, Youth and Volunteering in 2007. In September 2008, she was promoted to Minister for Community Services and in December 2009 she was appointed Minister for the State Plan. She has also the Coordinating Minister for the Department of Human Services, the umbrella agency for the portfolios of community services, housing, ageing, disability and home care, Juvenile Justice and Aboriginal Affairs. Linda's the first Aboriginal Australian to be elected to the New South Wales Parliament and a proud member of the Wiradjuri Nation. Her commitment to Indigenous issues spans more than 30 years. So we really look forward to hearing from you, Linda, as to what Labor will support if elected on March 28.
Thank you for that introduction, and hi everyone, how are you? Good, I reckon you're a tough crowd. Can I join with the Minister in recognising country, and I'm sure that John will obviously pay that same protocol. And this is an election forum, and there is 19 days to go, but who's counting? And it's interesting just listening to Adrian. Some of the synergies with he and I, of course, is that we both grew up in the Murrumbidgee, and he lives in a town only 25 miles or about 35 minutes from the town that I grew up in, so we have that in common. Can I also just I'm going to make a couple of introductory comments, and I don't think you need all the gumph that I could go through, but also just make some responses to what the Minister has said, as well as just announce where Labor is at this point, specifically in the early childhood space. But you know, it is interesting in the lead up to an election. Whilst your forum is on tonight, that doesn't mean that we have finished our announcements in this space or any other space. And the same, I think, could be said for the government. And as I said, there's 19 days to go, but we have made a number of announcements in the early childhood space already, which I will go over. I think the other thing is that what has struck me so in a strong way from your sector, and I've known it, as Leanne knows, for a very long time now, is just how committed but also organised you are, not only through the union movements, but also with your advocacy organisations, which strikes me as being extremely important. Now, Adrian made comments, I'm going to let you into some secrets here, made some comments about, you know, going constantly to Treasury to put up your arguments as the Minister responsible for early childhood education. And I can tell you, at any government level, be it red or blue government, it is really hard sometimes to get some of the hard heads in your cabinet even engaged in a discussion around early childhood education. And then to knock together the heads of your treasurer and whoever else's head you need to knock together to get extra funding is sometimes extremely difficult in this space. And I don't think I'm telling any secrets out of school on that one. The other thing, of course, that is really obvious in this sector is how complex it is. You've got so many different types of care, whether it be long day care, preschool, family day care. You've got 2 levels of government, but actually you've got 3 levels of government involved, which I want to make comments on, and I'm talking about local government and the challenges that provides in the provision of services to the early childhood sector. It's interesting also, you know, just listening to Adrian, and trust me, he and I get on real good. I did have a better education than that, very well. Although I was in Whitton Public School, is that it's interesting to hear, and I'm so pleased that you're pleased about staying committed to the National Quality Framework from the current government, and also to remind you that I was the Minister at the time when the National Quality Framework was negotiated. Joe Weatherall, who is now the Premier of South Australia, and I formed a formidable little team there, got some, I think, more sense into the rollout of the National Quality Framework, particularly in terms of getting qualifications for people that have been working in the sector for a very long time. And I felt strongly that RPL, that what that meant something if you'd been working in the sector for 25 years. And I'm not sure how a degree equates with that. So just to put that on the record. Adrian also made the comment about the move from early childhood from community services, where I was the minister, into the Department of Education, and philosophically I didn't disagree with that, which you'll hear about in a moment, but I was pretty passionate and I wanted to keep early childhood education. So that's one of the reasons that it didn't happen as quickly, but I do support very much the move now. Like everyone in this room, and I'm sure the speakers, we've all had the experience of children in early childhood education. My baby's 29 now. I still treasure the photographs from Marawina Preschool over there on the block, which of course is no more, which is a terrible, terrible shame in this space. So with those introductory comments, I won't go through everything that I had in what's been prepared here, except to say the obvious, that it's one of the most difficult areas of education. There's no two ways about that. The commitment, the complexity, but also the understanding in the broader community about the importance of early childhood education. And I do think that last point that I have made has changed. I think there is now more than ever the recognition and also the research behind what early childhood education actually means, not just to the individuals and families involved, but also to the economy. I know that when I was the minister, I was really impressed with the high scope peri-preschool study, which actually demonstrated that a return of $16 to society for every tax dollar investment in high quality care and education. We know that, you know that, but to get bean counters to understand that at times is extremely difficult. I am proud of the achievements of Labor over a number of years in this space. Most of you, I'd say, would be around when Maurice Yemmer was the Premier of New South Wales, and I was involved. I remember it was one of the inner west preschools, I think it was in Marrickville or Petersham, where he announced that $80 million increase in to boost participation in early childhood education, which was solely state money. When I was the minister, $26 million for the Community Childcare Cooperative, and also the Orange Community Resource Organisation to do some work in terms of placements. Can I just say that it seems to me that there are a number of issues that I'd like to just quickly mention and go to where Labor is at in relation to the announcements we've made so far in this space. Firstly, that every new school that will be built under a Labor government in New South Wales will have an early childhood education or a preschool, as well as out of school hours centre. And that's a firm commitment by Luke Foley at our campaign launch. The other announcements that we have made is that we would introduce a new SEP. Now, for those of you that don't know what a SEP is, it's an environmental planning instrument, and I know that many of the issues to establish new preschools goes to the planning agency about what's required, how difficult it is, how many car spaces you need, all those issues in planning. We're going to be introducing a new arrangement in the planning portfolio, specifically for early childhood education and education precincts. The point that was made, I think, which is fundamental around 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, is very, very important. I was at Walera Wayne Preschool or long day care quite a couple of months ago, and they have gone from being considered, I think it was remote, I might have that terminology wrong, to being in the broader city circle for their funding arrangements. And that's a community where jobs were being lost in the mining sector rapidly. There'd been the closure of mines, but it also meant that preschool, because of the different geographic location that they'd been put into, meant that they had lost something like $30,000, which might not seem much for a lot of people, but of course in your sector that means that has an enormous implications. And it seems to me that that's a very major issue that we need to take on whether or not those decisions have been right about geography and locations. And I think that that was going to the heart of what the women from the Central Coast were saying. One of the other things that I would like to see is a very thorough examination from a state perspective, but obviously, as Adrian said, you can't do much without the Commonwealth being involved. A really high-level approach, whether it be led by the sector, led by government, or in partnership, to have a look at the complexity of the early childhood sector. It seems to me that there has to be some way to reduce that complexity. I can't say what the answers are, but that is something that desperately needs to be done, whether it be through local government and their role in the early childhood space, but at the state and territory level as well. The other thing that I'd just like to say that obviously new funding arrangements will have ebbs and flows, but it seems to me that if the Commonwealth is laying down the rules that it is, they have to understand that not one size fits all. And I feel that that's what the early childhood sector is actually being forced into, and somehow or rather there needs to be a renegotiation in relation to that. Can I just finish up by saying a couple of other things? Well prior to the election campaign that we're in now, as I said, 19 days to go, I'm not eating very well. That's part of the problem. Is that we announced that there would be under a Labor government, a Minister for Early Childhood Education, a specific minister, and that we would not be moving to change the arrangements that have been put in place by this government, and that is keeping early childhood in the education portfolio, but with a separate minister that has a clear focus on this, not having to worry about what is a massive portfolio to try and drive some of the structural reform that's needed. Can I also just say that to me, and this is not just in this space, and I'll try and finish up in a moment, not just in this space, but one of the things that concerns me deeply under both the state government, but particularly the federal government, is the annihilation or the pulling the rug out from advocacy groups. And you're seeing it in disability services. The Abbott government's reforms, so-called reforms 2 days ago in the Aboriginal arena are horrendous. It will mean that we are going to see terrible outcomes in 5 years' time. And one of the things that Labor is completely committed to, and you can see that with our disability policy, is supporting advocacy. If advocacy is not there, then governments are not held to account, and governments should not be afraid of being held to account. Just in closing, can I say this is that the whole issue around 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds seems to me to be the biggest challenge that I'm hearing from you, and a commitment to working with you to sort through that, and obviously, like the present government, to hold the Commonwealth to account. You know, I'm glad Susan Lee's in health now because she's leaving you alone. That's a naughty thing to say. But the last point that I'd like to make, and it's a very serious one, and I'm sure that both John and Adrian would absolutely agree with that, and the Minister said it, and so I'm sure that John will say it as well, is that collaboration is absolutely critical, no matter who's in government in this space. And that's something that I completely commit to. However, my view of bipartisanship in collaboration is not a race to the bottom. It's a very different model to what a lot of people think, and that is that everyone has an equal say, an equal voice, and equal time. Thank you.
Well, what I heard you say, Linda, is that you've acknowledged some shared challenges, first of all, in this space with Minister Piccoli, that you share Labor's challenge of seeking federal funding, that there's complexity in the types of care and the different levels of funding, that there is a shared commitment to the National Quality Framework. Thank you very much. And the importance of qualifications, and that collaboration is critical in this space as well. So it's great to see some commonality of approach there. I also heard you say that Labor supports the early childhood being in the education portfolio, and that you're also pleased to see community recognition in the importance of early childhood and the importance to the economy. I'm assuming that means early childhood education and care is an investment, an important investment. So I also noted some key announcement and priorities from you, and that is that every new school built under Labor will have an early childhood service or preschool and an outside school hours care. That there'll be a new planning arrangement introduced for early childhood education and care in early childhood precincts. That there needs to be a thorough examination of the complexity of the early childhood sector to reduce this complexity through both local and state government, and that there needs to be more equitable funding systems. That there'd be a dedicated minister for early childhood education in an education portfolio under Labor, and that your great support for advocacy groups and the importance of that being a priority, and a commitment to sort the issues out with the threes and fours. So thank you for all those. I really acknowledge those priorities and welcome them. I just wanted to add a little bit about what we really want from the sector point of view, what we think is most needed. And that is an increase in funding. You're going to hear it again, I'm sorry, but it is what we've got the opportunity to say to you tonight, so I really want to say it. We do need that increase in funding, and that's what we've been calling for through the Bigger Slice of the Cake campaign, where just last week representatives of the forum were gathered outside Macquarie Street to call on parliamentarians to support the call for increased funding for early childhood education and care, no matter what the result on March 28. And we all know that this is not an easy task, and funding is stretched across government, we recognise that, but the figures are clear. A child in New South Wales receives less funding per year than a child in any other state or territory. And we really can't let New South Wales children be left behind. So we urge the New South Wales Government to invest a total of $4,000 for each 3 and 4-year-old, a 5-fold increase in funding, which will enable 3-year-olds to access 2 days a week and 4s to access 3 days a week of early education, and families to pay $10 a day. That would really up the access rates. How can we make this happen? We really do need to work together for a solution. So now I'd just like to welcome questions from the floor to debate, question and develop the way forward for children in New South Wales. So if we could work towards questions more than statements, but so just open the floor.
Hi Linda, my name is Amanda Holt, I'm from Newcastle.
G'day.
G'day. It's great to see you speaking again at one of these forums. I was quite inspired last time you spoke. So thank you. And I'd like to acknowledge for all parliamentarians, I understand that it's difficult to get funding. What I would ask of you is, with the number of community services that, and let's think about it, community services being preschools, long daycare, that were built for the community, by the community, to serve the community, a lot of them are now, a lot of the councils are now considering privatisation.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
I think it's a cop-out. You know, I am the member for Canterbury, and that's a council that's been on the news a bit, but you know, there was a move for that council, and I understand that it's happened right across the board, to either privatise or lease out or completely exit the field in the early childhood space. And I just think it's a really retrograde step. You know, it's not because the council's changing focus, in my experience. It's because the council sees early childhood centres as an expendable thing that they can cut off to save money, and to me that is a shocking motivation for local government to do something like that. I'm seeing it happen, you know, with swimming pools and tennis courts, and you know, selling every bit of green space to developers in the city, which I also have enormous problems with. The interesting thing in my experience in my local area is that the community just absolutely reared up against the council making those moves. But I think I think councils should be shamed into it, and their elections are in 2016.
Yeah, hi, I'm Christine, actually from Waverley Council, one of the local governments. And I guess, just timely that I speak now.
Except for Waverley, there
I do remember talking to you a number of years ago, and I appreciated your being active in changing the 1-to-4 ratio from 1 to 5. I guess one thing that you raised that I wanted to mention to both ministers is at Waverley we do have long daycare as well as family daycare, and you mentioned family daycare. Sorry. And I guess I was wanting to ask you if you both could agitate admittedly it's not funded through the state, it's funded federally, but that is going to be lost at the end of this financial year, the funding for all family daycare services that are metropolitan or regional. It's only going to be remote. And I guess I was hoping to ask both of you to agitate at the federal level for that not to occur.
I think we can do that. I think that's more of a question for Adrian at this point in time, with 19 days to go. But look, I hear what you're saying, and I was aware that is going to be the outcome, and it's one of those. It's one of those issues that states, I am sure, other than New South Wales, will agitate about. But thank you.
The next question we're going to take from the Facebook.
So Brenda Jones from Facebook would like to know the stance of the ALP towards access to all 3-year-olds in New South Wales preschools, and how they would ensure that if this access was returned, that the funding currently provided would also be not only maintained but improved. And she finishes with this: we cannot go backwards, only forwards if quality matters.
Well, I certainly agree with the last bit. Look, I'm not in a position to stand in front of you today and say that there's going to be a massive increase in funding along those lines. In an election campaign, I want you to appreciate that that's a very impossible thing for me to do at a forum like this. It's something you work out with the campaign team and also the Parliamentary Budget Office. What I have said, though, is that issue of access for 3-year-olds is something that I recognise and something that I would see as a major issue to take forward, and probably the most important issue from what I'm hearing at this forum.
Linda, Dave McElroy. I'm from United Voice New South Wales. We're the Union for Early Childhood Educators, and I just wanted to echo the words that Shannon, one of our leaders, put in much better terms than I ever could, actually working in this space. But, you know, we've heard from yourself and from the Minister about the professional work that educators do and the quality reforms have brought about, which is great because these people, 96% of whom are women, are not babysitters, but they're still paid as if they're babysitters. And that's just not acceptable in a modern Australian economy. So what would a Labor government do if it was elected to say to the Commonwealth, which has primary funding responsibility in this area, it's not good enough, the Commonwealth has to get to fix the workforce crisis in this sector and address the poverty wages of early childhood educators?
Thank you very much, and congratulations to the great work that you mob have done over the last few years in this space, including a memorable event, I think, at Hyde Park, where there were large people dressed up in animal costumes, and one was a caterpillar, as I call. Look, I think that's probably one of the key, well, not probably, that is, in my view, the key issue facing this sector, and that's parity of wages, which we've heard a lot about, and you do not ever go to an early childhood education forum without hearing that. I think Adrian said much the same thing. It is such a large bucket of money that we're talking about. It's difficult for any level of government to just say, yeah, we're going to do that. But that doesn't mean it shouldn't be dealt with. That doesn't mean that states should not be advocating as strongly as possible with the Commonwealth, bringing about some of that parity, whether it be over an incremental period or not. It seems to me that that is the crux of the key issue. The other thing that I was going to say is that it comes back to that complexity issue and the various levels of qualifications. And that was what the National Quality Framework was about. I think probably a few unintended consequences, looking back on it. But that is the issue. You're not going to get an answer of, well, Labor will commit to that, because that would be impossible, as Adrian has found in government. But that does not mean that there should be a washing our hands of that issue, because until that's dealt with, there will not be parity in this sector.
When your party left power, the proportion of the...
Oh, that's a very nice way of putting it.
Okay, when your party was... the proportion of the education budget that was spent on early education was 3%. It's now only 2%. And I don't believe, although it's hard to tell through the budget papers, that our actual spending has dropped. So money is coming into the education space, just not into early education. And both you and the Minister both acknowledge the importance of early education. What can we do to get some of that money into early education?
Well, I don't know that it has to be up to you. It seems to me that that's up to government, whoever it is, and the Minister, whoever it is, to continue that argument. I mean, I go back to my early point. It is so difficult to get everyone to focus on the importance of this sector. And it just seems to me there needs to be a major push, as I said, whoever the Minister is, whoever the government is, to actually educate your own people within the parliamentary process on just what this means. And one of the things I learned a long time ago when I was dealing in the disability space is that, you know, you're relying on, this is a good thing, it's great for children, da-da-da-da. Well, it's bloody good economic sense. Yeah. And sometimes that's when the penny drops for a lot of people that don't want to think about it or think that, you know, greyhound racing or poker machines or whatever it is much more important, deserves a longer discussion. So I think it's a responsibility of all of us to bring about that awareness and that political muscle to make it happen.
Thank you.
I was absolutely delighted to hear planning and local government reforms mentioned, because I think whether it be early childhood education care services in a traditional sense or outside school hours care as well, this is a space where there's been a real lack of coordinated and strategic planning. So that's a bit of a tip my hat to you. I'm keenly interested to know, Minister, whether or not the Coalition would support some planning reforms to introduce more strategic and coordinated planning, and also what the Greens' view on this is as well, because it has been missing in action in terms of coordination and accessing demographic data. So keenly interested in seeing it implemented.
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's part of what we announced today at Victoria Avenue School about planning, and not just local government planning, but so my understanding, when you want to start up a service, you put in the DA, then you subsequently then have to make submission to the department to actually get places funded. Now, that's a long way through, a long process. So not only at a council level from a planning perspective, but the planning of all of the things you need to do to start a service, coordinating that, streamlining it, so you actually have to put in one application. There's lots of things we can do to improve that. Victoria Avenue, brand new school started this year. It's got a community-based, it's actually built with an USH facility, it's built with a childcare, with a long day care centre operated by the council. It's even got a healthcare facility built into it, and that is the way you build schools in a modern context. You provide for community facilities. The hall can be used by the broader community there at Canada Bay. That's how you build new schools, and I think all schools will be built like that in the future.
What about existing? Or existing services that might want to expand or need to expand to meet community demand, or existing schools that have run out of space with their rush and have nowhere to put them. How do we actually address those sorts of issues?
Oh, well, you'll see some of the capital works announcements we've made in recent times. We've got lots of demand pressures in public schools, particularly in the city, on the North Shore, in the west, around Parramatta. Part of those expansions is about making sure we provide those facilities as well. There are about 600 public schools already that have an USH operating in their schools. A lot of them that don't have demand for them. But obviously where we can use public assets like schools and the land particularly to provide services before and after school care, holiday care, childcare, then we should. It's the right way to use public assets.
Would those staff be employed under the Education Department and the Education Department? They wouldn't enjoy the same wages as what early childhood teachers receive in a preschool and education department?
Yes.
No? Okay.
I'm just going to invite Linda for any closing remarks she'd like to make now, and then we'll
I think probably I don't have a great deal to add except to say thank you, and I know that you will keep advocating, and that is exactly what should happen. Can I just add one thing, although it's slightly off the topic, but Adrian's raised the issue, or we talked about the issue of USH provision. The one thing that Labor will not do is begin to charge USH centres market rent. That will not happen under Labor government.
Thank you so much, Linda. Here's a little gift for you. So I'd just like to invite Rebecca O'Sullivan to introduce our next guest.
Thanks, Trish. It's with great pleasure that I introduce to you Dr. John Kay, member of the Legislative Council and of the Greens. So John Kay was elected as a Greens member of the New South Wales Legislative Council in March 2007. Before entering Parliament, John taught and researched electrical and engineering at the University of New South Wales, where he specialised in sustainable energy and greenhouse issues. John obtained his PhD from the University of California, Berkeley. John is a strong advocate for renewable energy, effective public services, consumer rights, securing a sustainable water supply, and public education. John also served as a volunteer spokesperson, campaign coordinator, parliamentary policy advisor, and candidates for the Greens New South Wales. John's portfolio areas include, wait for it, education, energy, treasury, consumer affairs, finance and services, water, hospitality, gaming and racing, and health. That's a list. I'd now like to invite John to come and talk to you all.
Thank you very much, and I too acknowledge that we're meeting on the land of the Gadigal. This is Gadigal land, always has been, always will be. I acknowledge Aboriginal people present, I acknowledge the elders of the land. I'm really pleased to be here. I was just thinking on the way over here, the last time in my life that I was not in serious trouble with somebody important was when I was in preschool. So I have fond memories of those days. It seems that ever since then I have been. I don't need to tell this audience about the studies that talk about the benefits of preschool education. Not just the individual benefits, but the society-wide benefits. But I do want to read something I found that Tony Vinson wrote a decade ago. Tony Vinson, known to many of you as a professor of social work from the University of New South Wales and University of Sydney, and the author of the ultra-important Vinson Report. Tony said this in 2006, "The alternative to investing in early childhood education and care is to live with the cruel hypocrisy of expecting and accepting early school departures followed by heavy investments in the state agencies that control the behaviour of people ill-equipped to face the challenges of contemporary society. What an improvement it would be, morally, economically, to do something serious about challenging the intergenerational transmission of poverty and limited education that continue to help shape the destinies of significant numbers of our children." That was 2006. Yes, please do clap for Tony Vincent on me. And that was 2006, and we have made some progress since 2006, but we are a long way from being there yet. The benefits, the educational benefits, you talk to a primary school teacher, as many of you I'm sure do, and you hear about the difference between a child who's been in preschool and a child who's not been in preschool. The difference, everything from being able to sit still in a classroom and hold a pen, through to a basic understanding of what education is all about and a self-awareness of their role in the educational process. But there are also lifelong benefits of preschooling. The studies show very clearly, if you want young girls not to get pregnant, if you want them to not leave school early, if you want them to engage, if you want children once they leave school to engage with higher education, every study in Australia, in the United States, around the world shows that preschooling is the key. Quality preschooling is critical, and the more of it, the better. No child is going to go backwards because they have 2 years of preschooling, and most children will be advantaged by 2 years of preschooling. But it's not just preschooling, it's quality preschooling. Quality preschooling means preschooling delivered with the appropriate ratios, so there can be the concentration on the children and attention to those children and their learning needs that is required. It's also about qualification. Quality preschooling cannot be delivered by people who are not professional. And we're slowly learning that lesson, and that's a good thing, but we still have a long way to go. The problem, of course, the benefits of preschooling generally are 4 years, 8 years, 10 years, 12 years, 20 years down the track. And politicians, myself included, are really right now fixated on what happens over the next 16 days, let alone over the next 4 years or 8 years or 2 decades. There is an intertemporal dissonance in the planning process around particularly early childhood matters because the benefits are so much later than the expenditure. But there is, beyond just the economic arguments, there is a social responsibility argument. The benefits are not just about lower costs, but they are not just about creating a more cohesive and successful society, but they are also about social justice. They're also about looking at a child and recognising that child didn't choose to be born into a disadvantaged family or into an advantaged family. That child did not choose to be born with an ability or a disability. That child did not choose to be born in rural and regional New South Wales or in a remote location or in inner Sydney. That child was born the way they were born, and it is the society's responsibility. Any civilised society would take responsibility to give that child the best possible start, and that means quality, funded, affordable preschools. But the problem fundamentally in Australia is that we do not put money into preschools to make them work. We spend 1% of our GDP, the OECD average is 6%, and the really successful nations are spending 8% of their gross domestic product on preschooling. We're under the OECD by a factor of 6. If we were to reach the OECD average, we would have to increase our expenditure 6-fold. I'm really pleased that it was not asked of us to come up with 6 times the current amount of funding, only twice. That's an easier challenge to meet. But it's not just how much we spend, it's who spends it. In Australia, early childhood services, the government takes responsibility for funding about 56% of early childhood services. The OECD average is 82%. We get less and parents pay more. And that has a whole range of really unfortunate consequences, including an affordability crisis for many parents who are driven out of the system purely by economic circumstances. An accessibility crisis where many communities don't have appropriate levels of childcare and early childhood education provision and are left in a situation where parents go without because of where they live. It's also a crisis in professionalism. The underfunding and the underfunding of early childhood services, education services, results in the appalling rates of pay, and those appalling rates of pay challenge the concepts of professionalism. There is only one way to resolve that, and that is to make sure that early childhood educators are not paid as babysitters, they are paid as educators. But it also results in a crisis of stability for early childhood education providers, where the long-term security, and we've heard this evening, and I really take on board what a lot of people have said. There are real risks to the future of the sector because of the underfunding, with qualified expert teachers being lured across the road to the primary school, and that will only get worse as that cohort grows in the primary school education period. The Professor Brennan's changes are challenging. Professor Brennan and Minister Piccoli adopted these changes, suggested that the budget, the slice of the pie that goes to early childhood, be better focused, be rationalised and focused onto 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds from disadvantaged backgrounds and Indigenous 3-year-olds. I have grave concerns about what those changes are doing to the sector, and those changes to the sector, Professor Brennan's recommendations come from exactly the same place that the Productivity Commission's report came from, the same dysfunctional place. You start with the money, you work to the sort of services you can provide. No parent would accept that for their children, no society should accept that for our children. We should start with the services we need, and then we should talk about the money that we need to provide those services. We cannot continue to operate planning of early childhood education backwards, because the consequences of the Brennan report, it sounds great, let's concentrate the money where it's most needed, universal provision to 4-year-olds, and only those 3-year-olds that would otherwise be disabled, that come from disadvantaged backgrounds. The problem with that, of course, is that we're going to have centres, and I'm sure this is already happening, where there are a large number of 4-year-olds and a relatively small number of 3-year-olds, unbalanced and difficult for those 3-year-olds, where they're in centres which are dominated by the big kids. We're going to see families, it was mentioned before, we'll see families who leave leave early childhood education for childcare options, because it's just easier. You've got a childcare option where you can have a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old. That's easier than an early childhood education preschool where you can only have a 4-year-old. And so those families will leave, and that will threaten the stability and the viability of a number of preschools. The problem is Treasury. Linda, I totally agree with you. We do have a major problem with Treasury. When I was first elected, I did a project looking at what Treasury had achieved in 100 years of New South Wales history. I got a very sternly worded letter from the Public Service Association union I belong to for doing that. But nonetheless, if you look at the sins of Treasury, And every minister, every shadow minister, every spokesperson such as myself, who's involved in a critical service department, whether it's education, early childhood education or health, recognises the dead hand of Treasury, the narrow short-term focus of Treasury. What's been asked for here, the Triple C New South Wales request is $4,000 per student. Off the current base of about $360 million, we'd have to double that, put in an additional $360 million. That sounds like a lot of money, and I have to be honest with you, I don't think we can find that money in this election. What we will be announcing next week is about $200 million out of the budget that will go to early childhood education, both within the community sector and within the public sector. Why would we do that? Well, $200 million is going to earn a benefit, a social benefit, of $3.2 billion. I don't know of any other investment where you can earn that kind of return, and it's certainly worth doing. We will also be announcing additional funds, additional capital funding for new and refurbishment of existing community preschools and also public preschools. We announced last week $20 billion of capital works spread across public transport, public education, public health, and other job creation programs and renewable energy. We were able to announce $20 billion without privatising the electricity industry. And we could do so because we were prepared to tax. We were prepared to say to some sectors of the economy, you don't lift your own weight, particularly property speculators and the extremely wealthy registered clubs who received a massive tax cut when Morris Yema, who was mentioned earlier, became Premier, cut back on the tax rates on both took away the vendor tax on property speculators and took away the increased tax rates on the clubs that make more than $1 million a year in profit. We would reinstate those. That enables us to borrow $20 billion and a fair slice of that, and I'll be announcing on Sunday how much will end up in new preschool facilities, including mobile preschools. You'll be pleased to know we're also interested in expanding mobile preschool services. But one of the key and critical outcomes has to be additional operations funds. That $200 million, we believe, will go some distance towards taking the pressure off salaries in the early childhood sector. We're really concerned about the industrial relations environment being created by a sector that has not adequate funds to pay the salaries that are deserved. I don't envy any community childcare, any community preschool operator the task of negotiating with their staff. I don't envy that at all. It must be heartbreaking to know that you have quality staff, teachers who really know what they're doing, teachers who are producing brilliant results, but you can't offer them anything like the salary they would get if they fled the sector and went across the road to a primary school. That has to come to an end. We have to equalise salaries. And unless and until we do that, the sector will continue to struggle. We also welcome the Minister's commitment to minimum standards, to the quality framework. That's critical, but it has to be backed by cash. Cash from the state and cash from the Commonwealth. We can't continue to operate a sector. We cannot continue to operate a sector off the goodwill of the teachers within it. It simply doesn't work. We're going to burn out teachers. It is time for pay that recognises the professionalism, the quality of work that's done and the difficulty of work that's done by early childhood educators. I want to finish by echoing the words of Linda. I understand, for example, I'm critical of Adrian for what he did in the way he implemented the Brennan report. I think it was a mistake, but I also understand that Adrian deals with Liberal Party treasurers, and I know what they're like. They're kind of like Labor Party treasurers, only they went to exclusive private schools mostly, which makes them probably marginally worse, but nonetheless, treasurers are treasurers. It doesn't matter who's in government. Linda said before it ought to be up to politicians. I think it ought to be up to all of us. She finished on a note of collaboration. I want to finish on that note as well. I'm not going to be the Education Minister on March 28th, not even on the April the 1st, although if I were to become the Education Minister, that'd be a great day for it to happen. But I will likely get re-elected and I will likely maintain this portfolio. And if I do, I will definitely still be a thorn in the side of whoever is the Minister, as hard as I can, and whoever is Treasurer, to be pushing for what we all know, what everybody in this room, including the Minister, knows is necessary to be done for this sector. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks, John, for that very emotional and passionate kind of plea. I think that everybody in the room could agree with everything that you were saying, really. So just to say back to you what I think I heard, you very much talked about setting the context. And for somebody that has come from the community sector, to really hear about Tony Vincent, to be reminded of Vincent's report and the broader context than just education is also really important, because I think we are all working on the care side of things as well as the education, and that's really, really important to have, as Linda talked about with the Perry Preschool, but just to remind us and remind the bean counters up there about that the importance of the early years. Talked about you saying about no child going backwards, and that the importance of a quality education and the importance of the quality educators, and I think we all thank you for your ongoing support on that and being able to take that up into the powers that be. Something also I think that John talked about was the international context and reminding us about where we're sitting on compared to other countries, and some of our probably a lot more work and lobbying that we all need to do to try and raise some of that profile. So that was really good. John acknowledged the rates of pay and the importance of the stability of the services, ensuring that they're all viable, and we all agree with that. And you know, certainly from our point of view, the rural and regional services are really, really important, and making sure that they're viable, ongoingly viable, is really important. We heard you talk about starting with what the services need rather than what the bucket of money looks like, and I think that's really, really important, and again, we all support it. It sounded like you were also making a commitment to continue to lobby for equal pay for the early childhood teachers, and again, we all absolutely agree with you, I think, and support you in that. So without much further ado, I think we should hand over to questions for John. So I don't know if we have any more?
I've said it all.
I actually don't have a question. I'd just like to say, the first time I've heard someone speak that really speaks on behalf of what I feel, and I'm really passionate about my profession and my service, and all the things that you have said really ring home and ring true for me, and I'm sure a lot of other people here. I think the goodwill of people that have been in the industry for a long time is really being stretched at the moment, where you give so much for, it might be monetary little return, but you get a lot more return from job satisfaction and actually giving to the community. However, when things are made even more difficult in a difficult